Welcome to the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast. My name is Omri Johnson, your host. Season 3 of the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast will be focused on opening up dialogue about a way forward in the diversity and inclusion space that's focused more on who we are than what we ascribe to one another. It will be about shifting patterns and practices we've come to adhere to in the space, examining them with fresh eyes in the current climate, about principles the work has revolved around and why and what principles we might need to consider anew, about exploring our thinking, how we are making meaning of our workplaces and the world around us in the most curious ways we can, how we listen with skill, openly learn, create the conditions that allow colleagues to know they matter. Welcome to the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast. This is Omri Johnson, your host. I am joined today by Elizabeth Buckner. I'll tell more about why I had to put the Elizabeth in there when I tell you about how we met. And I also will tell you that I often call Joy Elizabeth Buckner Denver, and we'll get into that as well. Welcome to the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast, Miss Joy Buckner.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It's exciting. I'm not often on this side.
I'm thinking about, I'm giving this away a bit. We're both from the center part of the country of the United States, and we don't have accents of these places. Like people are saying, where are you from? I'm like, Kansas. Like, what happens there? I said, not much. But that part of the country, we have this kind of flat newscaster type accent. I was just noticing that you don't really have a location ability finder GPS in your voice.
I do not. And then now, because I've been abroad for so long, I don't hear it. But when I go home, people think that I sound British, which I don't think that I do. But people are so confused. So confused.
When you're hearing other languages all the time, you probably start saying things because the people locally understand you better when you say it in a particular way. My wife doesn't understand me 50% of the time when I'm speaking in English because the way she articulates English words is very different than me with her speaking like 8 languages. Anyway, Joy, as we always do on the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast, we ask a couple questions at the beginning.
Okay.
So, before we jump in, please share a favorite song or movie that you go to over and over again.
Okay, so this is the thing. I think I might have prepared for this question more than I prepared for any of the other questions. And I'm just like, wait, okay. And you can't tell a neurodivergent person, give me one. So, okay, we're going to narrow it down. So if I'm going to talk about my go-to song, I have go-tos and then I have some honorable mentions. Okay. Go-to song, hands down, is Gigolos Get Lonely Too by Prince.
Wow, you went deep. Wow. You're a Prince fan.
I am and I'm not. But there's just like that song, you can't not love it. All the doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. How can you not? And then honorable mention.
You're the first person that said gigolo on the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast, by the way. But go ahead. Yeah.
I was telling my friend Misty this morning, I was like, maybe I shouldn't pick that song. And she's like, if it's your song, it's your song. It's my
song. We're about inclusion.
Exactly. Okay. Gigolos Get Lonely Too, hands down, go to, picks me up every time. Honorable mention, Frankie Beverly and Mays Traveling Man.
Oh.
And
you ever heard that live?
No.
I have. Oh.
Isn't it just, it's something about instrumentation. And then right now I have been on a like alternative R&B kick, like Korean R&B. Yes. And then also I've had on repeat, he's not Korean, or Train Gazing by Sam Wills. And then Kristen Korea has been like in my on repeat. And then I just got Spotify. They did the end of the year recap. All of those came up. And if
Very
I'm going to
good.
go by movies, I don't have go-to movies. I have things that I go back to, but movies I like them to take me on a journey. I don't typically like movies. I tend to figure movies out very quickly and then get frustrated the rest of the movie. Like, why hasn't anyone else figured that out? And so I love anything with an amazing soundtrack or score, like The Photograph with Issa Rae. That movie had like a beautiful soundtrack. Or Pride and Prejudice has like amazing score. So those type of movies I love, or anything like whimsical.
That was a list. Let's go to the second question.
Okay.
One book or one person that has influenced or inspired you personally or professionally in your life career journey.
Book, hands down, Shantaram. All-time favorite book ever. It's definitely about a journey, but then the character just reinvents himself over and over again, and then doesn't give up. It's like you escape prison, you somehow get to India and become like a slum doctor if you're in war in Afghanistan. It's just a beautiful book. I grieved that book when I finished it. It's a long book, but hands down favorite book I've ever read in my life.
Yeah, I've heard of it, but I've never read it. So now I have to.
I might have to send you a copy. Literally, it's really long. It's 1,000 pages. And
I'm not necessarily an Ayn Rand fan, but I've read all of Ayn Rand's books, and
yeah. And then I've had some books that like had me in a chokehold for the last. I'm into fantasy right now. Court of Thorns and Roses, or Crescent City. That whole series had me in a little bit of a chokehold, just because I like being transported to different places, and I like people who are misunderstood, because I'm a bit misunderstood.
That actually is a perfect segue.
Okay.
To our next question. Tell us about you, who you are, what you're up to, your work, what you're creating in the world.
Gosh. What am I creating in the world? So I, as you said, am Joy Elizabeth Buckner. I'm from Colorado. I'm a Colorado girl at heart, but have been living abroad for the almost 13 years now. So I'm an educator. So started off as a teacher, moved into leadership. Now I'm an educational consultant. But I think most defining is, I mentioned it before, I'm neurodivergent. And that really shaped who I was as a person, because long before I really knew or had the language to talk about what it was that I had, it was just really, it dictated everything. And it took a long time for me to understand how my brain worked, what my brain did. And that kind of took me to what I do now. So really taking people through, how does your brain work? How do you learn? How do you show up in the world? I do a lot of work with parents and teachers and ministries of education to just support diverse minds. So as a consultant, I train teachers, train leaders, work with ministries. But more recently, I've really been honing in on the work that I do with neurodivergence. So I have a podcast called The Joy of Neurodiversity, where I'm just trying to build belonging and show dignity to the brilliance of neurodivergent thinkers, just by having conversations and exposing people. So yeah, I've been doing this for about 25 years. No one believes me because I have a bit of a baby face, but I'll just say that I am an educator at heart.
You've been living abroad. Where exactly in the world are you located right now?
I live in Dubai. Yeah.
And why Dubai? It's just from the United States, like a lot, obviously, like somebody from London or somebody from where I live in Switzerland, they might go to Dubai, right, to work. Other people from other parts of the Eastern European countries go to Dubai. People from Asia go to Dubai. Other southern, more East or Southern Asia go to Dubai. Why Dubai for you? All the places you could have gone.
Yeah. And I honestly didn't really think of many other places before I came to Dubai. So I was working in Washington, D.C. I went to Hampton University, and after Hampton, moved up to D.C., as many Hamptonians do, and worked in the D.C. metro area for years. And I was at a school that I loved. I'd been there for 5 years as a leader, and my job was being eliminated for funding. And so I found myself like, what do I do? And I had several friends who had recently moved to Dubai and were teaching. And then I had a couple close friends who lived in Dubai, but not in the educational industry. And so I was just like, oh, I'll apply to go to Dubai. Not really thinking that I would have gotten it. So I just was looking for different options. I didn't really want to move home to go to Denver, but like that was seeming what was going to happen. And I got 6 offers.
Wow.
It was just like, maybe this is where I'm supposed to be. And at the time, there was just a lot of opportunities. I came and was working for a pretty big educational company here, but then a lot of the ministries of education were hiring. So it was just like the perfect little storm. And then you move to Dubai, everyone says you're going to come for 2 to 4 years. And then I'm going on 13. You just get stuck.
Yeah. So you started your career kind of working in educational systems of the U.S. How have you seen education evolve as it relates to dealing with how I define diversity, the mixtures of differences and similarities in their respective tensions and complexities? What's evolved, and how has the role of educators and practitioners like yourself shifted over this time that you've watched education grow, particularly, let's say, when it comes to neurodivergence specifically?
So I guess starting my career in the US, it gave me a bit of a front row seat on like how institutions talk about difference. But as I moved here or moved abroad, I guess I should go back. I think in the States, diversity was really looked at from a narrow term. So either looking at race or language, sometimes disability. It was more about categories, not so much about humans, right? And so that's what I had a front row seat to in the States. And now moving here and working, I've worked across 25 plus countries. It's come pretty unmistakable to me that every system, whether it's in education or corporate or community or government, I think that we're looking more at the human side of difference now. I'm not sure if I actually think that's a good thing all the time. So I think that's where I've seen it shift a little bit. I think that I see some real gaps in the countries, and I'm not even sure if I'm even answering your question. No, but I've seen it evolve from focusing on like identities, so race, what have you. And I don't see that here. We don't care. Dubai doesn't, or this part of the world doesn't really care about race. They look at passports and the human side of people. It's not really like the disabilities of things. I guess what I've seen shifting is now I see people recognizing brains and bodies and cultures and contexts and histories, and more so looking at lived experience. I think one thing that frustrates me is how far apart practice is when it comes from country to country. And so I think that's something that I'm beginning to really struggle with. And how do you bridge that chasm where, as for instance, in the UAE, we look at neurodivergence as a difference and something that we need to accept. When I go to neighboring GCC countries, I get met with, oh, you're just so smart to be neurodivergent, or we don't have that here. There's no neurodivergent people here. So when I see like the differences from country to country, that is a little bit concerning to me. But I think if I can bring my answer back, we used to look at and I still do to a extent, but look at really like the deficits. And I'm seeing that now people are looking at kind of the differences. So the differences in the brain, the differences in the bodies, the culture, the context, and then using that as a starting place, as opposed to the deficit. So I see that as a positive.
Is that something that teachers have come to recognize, or has it been more from families, from school systems, from administration? Are teachers like getting, or maybe you all even got it before, they're recognizing who people are, not just what they have that might seem like it's not so good?
So I think that teachers are a difficult bunch. We are very much creatures of habit, and we just go with what we've historically done, right? So I'm not sure if teachers are the driving force behind things. I think that teachers might at times seem like they're the driving force because we're like on the front lines of things and you
Right,
have to
right.
deal with different situations. But I don't know how many times I've had to talk to teachers about their beliefs of, oh no, they're just lazy or they're just not trying hard enough. Like the people who I have like the most difficult time changing minds about the way that we look at certain differences or brain differences are teachers. So I'm not sure if I think that is where it's coming from. I think parents are really driving narratives. And a lot of times ministries of education are really doing that. And then it trickles down a bit to teachers. I think with educators in general, like we haven't changed our education the way that we educate for hundreds of years. So
Really? That's the truth, huh?
I don't feel like we've changed the way we might have put it in a new box or dress it up a little bit differently. But at the heart of it all, we teach to the middle. We educate to the middle. We build societies to the middle. We're never really not always looking at the margins. And that's what we talked about in Almaty. I know we're getting to that. But it's easier to teach it's easier to teach.
Yeah, I mean, it's more efficient.
Yeah. And actually, I shouldn't say I think it's easier. I don't think it is easier if you know how to shift it. So yeah, I think that there's people who end up being influenced by the outside and it looks like we're the ones that are driving it. And often with educators, we're just not as educated as we should be in certain circumstances. So.
It was interesting. The one thing, I'm going to move to Almaty. That's where we met. What are the chances that we would have met in Almaty, Kazakhstan? I haven't been in education. So for me, it was like, whoa, this is amazing. I can't believe all these people are here doing all this great work. The Congress was focused. It was the World Inclusion Congress. And it was inclusion in education. It was fascinating to me because what you just shared about looking at group identities as we have in the Western world, particularly the Anglosphere, that just wasn't the thing. And so it was an everybody. And obviously neurodiversity was up there on the things because a good number of the people that were presenting either were neurodiverse or work with neurodiversity. They even told me that I might be neurodiverse based on their assessment when we were having drinks. I wasn't drinking, but they were. And the more we drank, or they drink, the more neurodivergent I became. But that was at least their assessment of me.
No, we'll talk about that too.
What did you share when you were there? What were your biggest eye openers?
Okay. One, what are the chances of two people from like neighboring states ending up on the same bus? And the same shuttle bus going to the Congress.
Those are different buses than our ancestors got on, huh? Yes. But go ahead.
So at the Congress, I gave a talk called From Margins to Movement, and it really looked at reimagining inclusion through neurodiverse innovation. And so one thing that I named at the Congress is that there really is a blind spot around neurodivergence. And I'm not saying that there's not an awareness, because there is certainly an awareness when it comes to neurodiversity. However, and I make that distinction between neurodiversity and neurodivergence because people use them pretty interchangeably. And I find myself doing that sometimes as well. So we all, I guess just to give some background, we all fall in the range of neurodivergence, right? So you have neurotypicality on one side and neurodivergence on the other side, right? 20 to 30% of the population is neurodivergent, but everyone falls on that spectrum at some point. And of neurodiversity. It's like biodiversity, right? So we're all part of an ecosystem, but we just have some brains that are considered to be more neurotypical, some brains that are not, but they're all brains, just brain different. So I think that there is a awareness of neurodivergence, but I think that there's a huge blind spot behind neurodivergence. For instance, maybe less than 20% of teachers feel that they've been prepared to deal with neurodivergence. There was a poll of university students done in the UK, I believe, in 2024. 64% of them had never heard the word neurodiversity. I'm dyslexic. I didn't start using the term neurodiversity until very commonly, maybe 5 years ago. So there's a blind spot when it comes to it. 74% of adults who are neurodivergent hide it in the workplace.
Wow.
So there's a huge blind spot when it comes to neurodivergence. And it also, we go surface. So you have your awareness weeks, awareness month, wear crazy socks for this or whatever, but people are not really getting down to the root of what neurodivergence is. We keep it surface with languages, with awareness, with policies. And so my talk was really looking at what can we do to address the margins, because we always talk to the middle. And I have a framework that looks at what we can do that. So 4 different pillars: the empowered pillar that really looks at consulting, training, reshaping systems and mindsets and beliefs about learners, about society. And then equipped, so tools and inclusive content for schools, for home, for communities that give us a little bit more of a deeper understanding about neurodivergence, and or gives you tools to help support if you have a neurodivergent brain or you have someone around you that does. And then Voiced is where it all started, is my storytelling platforms, my podcasts, my speaking engagements, where I really just try to reframe the narrative around what neurodivergence is. And then Connected, there's this huge ecosystem of collaborators who are doing amazing things in this space, but it's really hard to get us all together. So I'm working on a space where we all can be together. So that's where I talked about the roadmap of what I think needs to be done to go from the surface to the more in depth when it comes to neurodivergence.
What did you learn from your colleagues there? Were they experiencing, were you all having conversations about having similar experiences, or were there some distinctions that you saw in other parts of the world that you maybe have somewhat or not worked in before?
Yeah, so I definitely in Almaty just saw that there was a huge hunger for just understanding things, whether it be about neurodivergence or not, but just inclusion in general. There was just a huge hunger for that and a passion for people that were there. I was so blown away by everyone at the Congress. I just felt like these are my people.
No, it was beautiful. I felt at times I thought I was going to feel like an outsider because I
Really?
don't work in education, but I never felt that way. In fact, that everybody was focused on the who. I actually make this distinction a lot, that the focus on the who versus the what. We weren't as focused on what box to put children or families or parents or even adults that have neurodivergence. There was no box. Boxes just didn't exist. They were really thinking about whole systems, whole humans. And that was so incredibly refreshing, Joy, because I'll tell you, a lot of my colleagues in the space, in the diversity and inclusion, DEI space, they've been very focused on what categories that they're versed in. And it's created what we're seeing in the US right now without pointing fingers or placing blame. But a lot of it is because it seemed like it was for them versus everyone.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like I need to challenge you because you are an educator. Are you a traditional in the classroom teaching educator?
I appreciate that. But I told you my story. I started teaching out of college and I was like, oh no, this is so difficult. I don't know how these people do this.
We're crazy. We're crazy.
But I'm working so much just to get lesson plans done. And then these kids come in with some left out in the outfield stuff. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. No, teaching is hard. I'm sorry. It's the hardest job I've ever had. And I come from a family of educators. So it's hard. It's a hard thing. If we would pay teachers double, we probably wouldn't be paying them enough.
Oh, absolutely not.
And I think we would have a different group of people going into teaching if the salaries were higher, because it's more important than the education of the future. But it's so hard and
not respected.
No, absolutely. In fact, sometimes disparaged. So anyway, just being around that group was so affirming that I hadn't gone crazy in my approach, because I was basically being mirrored. I actually talked to one international school person who was responsible for inclusion, and she starts talking to me and she's like, after George Floyd, I didn't understand this whole putting people in their own categories and separating them from each other. She
Mm,
was so sincere. I didn't even bring it up.
yeah,
Like, I just didn't understand it. She
mm,
didn't even say it was wrong. She said, I didn't understand that. We didn't do that. And I can't tell you, I almost cried. Well, yes, exactly that. That was super revealing. And I'm so delighted that we met.
me
This
too.
conversation is the beginning,
Oh,
Aging.
I just think that when I was looking at what was it that really stood out for me, why did it feel so impactful, is that I feel like there was just this real need for, regardless with the inclusion, just naming what that gap was and offering a way forward. And I think that felt really important there. And it seemed like
Yeah.
everyone was working towards that goal. And so I think it's why I can't say enough about it. I hope to go back
No, it was
and again.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And we were in Kazakhstan.
Which was gorgeous. Who
Oh my
knew?
God, so amazing, so amazing. A shout out to Aida, who was our kind of hostess, and she was amazing too.
Ida is we are forever family.
Yeah,
Um,
she was awesome.
she's the best.
And this is me talking. There was a Joy Elizabeth, and then there was an Elizabeth Joy. And I know Elizabeth Joy, knew her before I came from a group where we have a similar speaking coach. And so like when we came, everybody was saying, we kept seeing on the chat, Joy Elizabeth, and then Elizabeth Joy. And we were like, what's going on? And then when we got there, we saw, and everybody's like, oh, okay, we can make the distinction between Joy, Elizabeth, and Elizabeth.
There was so much confusion. I'm not sure if it was for her as well, but like people were contacting me and I was like, I just don't think that I'm the person
That was
you're
hilarious.
trying to contact. And I didn't realize until we got on one of the pre-meetings that I was like, oh, her name's Elizabeth Joy. They just think that we're swapped.
Yeah, it was quite beautiful, honestly, because everybody was so incredibly cool with each other. So I'm really glad that the Joys, Elizabeth and the Elizabeth Joy, were both there and both brought
Yeah.
a lot to the group. I think in terms of voices, you all's voices stood out amongst them.
Thank you. It was a great experience.
We talked about the concept of mattering in
Yeah.
education. It was one of the things that I talked about when I was there. And for those that follow me and my work and how the researchers that I talk about quite a bit, Isaac Prelatinsky is one of the foremost researchers in mattering. He says it's feeling valued and adding value to those around you. And Gordon Flett, who's also does quite a bit around mattering in education, he's retired now, but he still writes and does research. And he says this: the student with a sense of mattering as part of a strong and positive self-definition will be resilient, adaptable, and relatively immune to feeling burned out, defeated, and demoralized when things don't go according to plan. What have you seen that fosters mattering in educational systems for children, especially those who are neurodivergent learners? And what do you think would be possible if we were focused on creating the conditions for children to know they matter?
So I had to think about this because I didn't want to be negative in my response. But if I'm going to be honest, I don't think that we've yet built a system that consistently fosters a sense of mattering with all children, especially not neurodivergent children. As I said before, most schools, most systems, they are designed around the middle, the typical learner, the typical brain. And also the belief that those that are on the margins will just somehow miraculously adapt. And that's just not how things work. We know that it's the opposite. We know that when you design to the margins, everyone benefits. It's like that principle of the rising tide, like lifts
all boat.
we know this in theory, but we're still just doing. That's why I said we've educated the same way since the beginning of the time, because we still continue to teach to that middle and not really teach to the margins, when we know that what you do for the students who are not typical will still benefit the ones who are probably going to be fine anyway. And so I think that a system that truly supports the most misunderstood thinkers or the overlooked learners, it becomes a healthier system, a more humane system for all of the students that we're dealing with. Now, I'm not going to say that I haven't seen moments of mattering, you always have those teachers who like take that moment to sit and slow down and say, is that student really getting what they need? Or you that teachers who are looking at the whole child, or systems that are looking at the whole
Right.
child. But I think that especially when it comes to neurodivergence, we always come from a deficit. And until we start shifting that, we're not going to make it a system where everyone feels like they matters. I think if we focus on like creating conditions for students to know that they matter, like really matter, I think that we start seeing students take more risks or advocating for themselves, or feeling grounded in their identity, and then we'll start seeing things make a difference, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah. I think that's an important part. We've had a lot of conversations about identity formation in the diversity space, but it's usually been about whatever we can see and about people understanding who they are as early as possible in their lives. And I know you're neurodivergent. I said that people think that I might be ADHD.
Yeah.
You saw how I work every day, and sometimes my desk, you would probably say, yes, he definitely is. My son is 6. And one, he's a little bit larger than the average. I'm a little bit larger than the
You are?
average.
I'm a little bit smaller than the average.
And he's had a variety of evaluations about his neurodivergence, and they never landed on what he is. And I'm actually, some part of me is glad, and part of me is maybe they need to know something so that they can give him as much as they can what he needs. And we're slowly seeing that he's able to self-regulate better. Like, these things are happening for him. But I imagine you've had times where you felt like you matter, and you probably had, I can tell, you've told me about your family, so I'm sure your mother and father were vigilant about you, just knowing how you show up in the world. And I imagine in some cases, there was some anti-mattering that where you didn't feel that way because of your neurodivergence. How has that impacted your work today? What stories, this storytelling platform, what stories have that you've experienced in your life have taken anti-mattering into the work that you do today?
Yeah. First, I want to back up and just give you a little bit of grace, you and your wife a little bit of grace. It's not an easy situation ever, dealing with a child who might walk through this world a little bit differently than others. And as I said before, like, it really comes from a place of deficit when you know your child is anything but. There's nothing wrong with him.
For us, it's always they think he's older than he is. So that kind of has played into it as well.
So it's just a really difficult thing to navigate. And to that point, I really do not think that there's anything. I don't think there's really a neurotypical brain. I think that we're all there, but I really struggled from a young age. So I have dyslexia, something called Irlen Syndrome, which is similar to dyslexia, often paired. The two kind of go hand in hand, and then was not diagnosed until 45 with ADHD, 45, 46. And so I struggled growing up understanding my own brain, but didn't know that I was struggling with understanding my own brain because there was just really I was just considered naughty and bad and disruptive and lazy. That's just the labels that I was given. And I guess that's the story that comes again and again. You asked about what stories really touched me about neurodivergence. It's always the same thing with us. We were lazy. We were defiant. We didn't try hard enough. If you were in my brain and you knew how hard I was trying in class, in school, in life, like, I was trying so hard just to try to feel normal. So that's the thing that I hear again and again, especially I have a twin sister. I have an older brother. So I was doing all this against people who were navigating this path in a way that was more accepted. And so it was really hard. It was really hard. And it took a long time for me to even make sense of it for myself. I grew up in mostly a neurotypical household. And so I'm sure that was also really challenging for my family, but there was never any doubt in my mind that I wasn't valued by my family. Like, I knew that without a doubt in my mind. I think what's difficult is that when you have a brain that navigates this world very different than everyone else's, other people can tell you that you matter. Other people can tell you that you belong. Other people can tell you that you're valued. We need proof.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think neurodivergents need extra proof.
Yeah. Actually, my son told me something a few weeks ago. He tells
Mm,
me these things. One time I got upset with him because he couldn't like bring himself down. We were in the bed and it was like 15 minutes of him wilding out. I was
yeah.
like, okay, son, this is, and I finally, I'm like, okay, Kai, all right, we got to do this. We got to start calming down. And then I raised my voice and I was
Yeah.
pretty loud. But when he hears my voice, he straightens up. So I try not to do it too much.
Yeah.
He leans over and he says, Daddy, well, this is just all a dream.
Oh.
So I was like, whoa, that was way too deep. Go to sleep. Uh,
Oh.
yeah, we're not going there, not right now. I asked him about it later. But then he said to me just maybe a month ago, he said, Daddy, I really want to do this thing or that thing, but just my brain, there's something in my head. And I'm like, he recognized that. And so like, to me, like neurodivergent kids, it feels like they are more self-aware than we give them credit.
Oh, absolutely.
How they work. Was that the case with kids and families you've worked with?
With families that I've worked with, families with my family, I think the way that we interacted, because I definitely was, I'm pretty sure my father was neurodivergent and our brains worked very similarly. And it caused a lot of kind of clash between us because
Okay.
like we were both just like extremely stubborn. He was always 5, 10 steps ahead of me, which in my thinking, which really pissed me off. And also because I was the one that was usually able to do that for other to other people, but I could never get in front of him, so I never felt like he was listening to me. I definitely see in parents that I work with, other students that I work with, a lot of the times. So what do they call it? Neurodivergents do something called, especially ADHD brains, do something called, I think it's penguining. It's like you start here in a discussion, right? And then neurodivergents go down and they're thinking deeper. And then they're like connecting dots in their brain, right? And then they pop up and then they say something that makes absolutely no sense to people who are listening, but they've already had the whole thought process. And so then they're like, they pop up. So they might start talking with one topic, come back with a completely different topic, but it's completely beautifully linked. But because no one else saw the linking happening, it just seems really random. And so kids get in a lot of trouble. And then down the road, the teacher might be like, oh, wait, that's brilliant. That makes so much sense. But because
No,
people are
that's it.
so far behind, it
Yeah.
seems like it's defiance.
It's exactly how my son weaves the world. He even tells you, I love patterns, Daddy,
Yeah.
at that age.
But a lot of time people don't see
Yeah.
it. You might not catch up with a neurodivergent like a way that a neurodivergent thinks. Or one thing that I really I'm trying to be more like trying to be better about. My best friend, it drives her nuts. I typically figure out what you're talking about when you say it. I know what your point is. And then I already have an understanding of and then I get frustrated that you haven't gotten there yet. And then I want to move on to talk about your point. Cause like, I really want to value your point, right? But your brain hasn't gotten there yet. Not that it's not like you're not a smart person, but I've already figured out. And then I want to respond to what I know you're going to say, but you haven't said it yet. So then I cut you off. And it's not because I'm not trying to value you. It's just because I just want to show you that I value you by already lied to you that I understand. It drives people nuts.
That's fascinating on multiple levels
Yeah.
because you also want to demonstrate how you bring value. That's what mattering is a lot about, is like
Yeah.
everybody wants to matter. And probably, at least my experience with my son is when he starts demonstrating something that's helpful. And
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, that's when he's most happy, because sometimes I don't follow him or I'm not in the place where I'm like, we need to get to school. We don't need to have this conversation taking 20 minutes to walk to school. That should take 8.
Yeah. His brain is, but I really need to take this in and explore it.
Exactly. And when he's able to articulate it, he feels like he's added value. And that's what it sounds like, getting back to the topic of
Yeah, I was just about to say,
Yeah.
that's why it's so difficult for a lot of times for neurodivergence to feel like we matter because like we're not always understood. It seems like we're going off topic, but we're not. And then feel misunderstood. Then your brain starts working. Am I making sense? Do I sound crazy? So much of that is connected to who you are as a person. So I think that as a woman who didn't know that I had ADHD, didn't really understand how my brain worked like it, now I'm backing up and going back and saying, that's why I do this.
I get
This
that.
is why. And then I think also you notice how much you were masking for all this time to try to fit into what people wanted you to.
Kenji Yoshino takes the term covering
Yeah.
from Irv Gottman's work. So that there was this, I cover stuff up because it might not have served me, or people might not have understood that about me, or they might use it against me.
And it just goes to, I think when you are dealing with people, whether you have a neurodivergent person in your life, a child, a friend, I think that it's opportunity to expand your empathy, your creativity, your patience, your capacity. And I think that when you embrace just everyone's brain, because it's helpful for me to interact with people who are not neurodivergent so that I can grow in those ways. But I think when you start having those conversations, that's when people start feeling like they matter, because you see them for who you are and you see the value that they bring. And then you also that person learns from you, you learn from them. So that's what I'm hoping that I'm able to do when I have conversations like this. Or for people, just like for you, I said the thing about the penguining. You're like, okay, my son does that. It just normalizes it. It makes it feel like a little bit less something that you're going to be frustrated about.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Joy, is there anything else as we move to closing? Is there anything else?
We get through all these questions so fast.
I mean, we probably, because we've been able to talk so much that we're just leaving stuff out. But I will promise this audience that this is not the last time you'll hear from Denver and Topeka.
No.
Where I'm from, Topeka, Kansas, about what we're going to be able to create to continue to move the work that I think is so critical. And I'm just learning about neurodivergence over the past few years. This is new. Even though I've been in this space, I've learned a great deal. I learned so much more when I was in Almaty. But Joy, is there anything else I should have asked you that I should have that you'd like to add to this dialogue?
One, I loved your questions and the whole conversation. So thank you. I'm so grateful for that. It's been fun. I think what I always want people to walk away with they interact with me, or they listen to my podcast, or they talk to me in everyday life. One, the point that I made earlier is that we are all on this spectrum, right? We all fit into this. In life, we like to separate ourselves, but we're all here. But I think what's most important for me is that neurodivergence is not something that's happening over there, happening in a small group of people, right? It's part of a human story. It shows up in our families, in our classrooms, in our communities, in our workplaces. And the more that we have the language for it, the more we can build compassion for it and curiosity for it. I think it's easier for people to start understanding and accepting. And I think when we do that, we'll become more capable of designing environments where everyone can thrive and everyone can feel like they're mattering. It's just going to seem like it's second nature. And that's what I'm hoping to do. That's really the heart of the work that I'm doing with speaking out and coming on podcasts and getting on my little soapbox about my crazy little brain of mine. I hope that conversations like this are what makes that shift actually begin to happen. So I'm really grateful to people like yourself who welcome me onto their shows or into their lives so that I can start having those conversations.
Joy Elizabeth Buckner, AKA Denver. Thank you so much for being a part of the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast. I will make sure we have links to Joy's podcast.
Please.
And to Joy's story beyond that. I hope this was helpful to everybody who's tuned in to listen. Make it a great day. Peace.
Thank you so much.
If you are committed or simply a little bit curious about how to make DEI accessible to everyone, actionable, that is, unambiguously prioritized and sustainable, aligned with personal and organizational purpose, hit the subscribe button. Make it a great day. Peace.